Okay, so thank you for coming and giving up your morning to spend some time with us. Today we're going to be talking about a topic I think that we're really interested in talking about in our community and other communities for that matter. Sometimes there's this, I think, misconception that in a academically competitive application that there isn't necessarily space for students taking the arts at the high school level with the idea of making competitive university applications. So today in our presentation, we will be sort of talking about some ideas about how this is a bit of a misconception, and we'll provide you with some examples and sort of evidence on that topic. Just a reminder, the presentation is being recorded, and we'll put the video up onto our YouTube channel, so we'll share that with people. The other thing that I'm excited about is we've just started adding subtitles to the videos, so we now have subtitles on our videos for traditional Chinese characters, simplified Chinese characters, Thai, Vietnamese, and Japanese and Korean. So hopefully more people will be able to access this content. All right, so first, this is just kind of, because we're a small group, maybe we can keep it a little bit more informal. There's a classroom activity that sometimes we do, which is called Think, Pair, Share, which is basically we take a moment for ourselves and we think, and then we turn to a neighbor, and then we talk with a neighbor about that idea, and then we come back sort of to the larger group. Today, we have a little bit of a smaller group, so maybe we can just sort of think and then sort of share more largely. When we think about what is creativity, let's take a moment and think about what we think it is and maybe why potentially it's also something that's important, and then maybe we can have a quick conversation as a group. Okay? So I'm just going to give people about 30 seconds to have a thought. All right, so when people are thinking about this, what are some of the ideas that come to mind about what creativity is? Okay, thinking outside of the box. When we say thinking outside of the box, what does that mean? So maybe we've got sort of a standard set of answers or a standard way of doing things, and when we think outside the box, we come up with a new way of thinking about things. Okay? Other ideas about what creativity might be? Okay, so this idea is we have a knowledge base. We've gone through some sort of process potentially of education or self-learning where we develop a set of skills, we develop knowledge, and then the creativity piece is the idea that we apply those skills in a new context. We apply those skills in a new way. We take that knowledge and we use it in a new way. The video that we shared with some of you in advance that I'll share with the people who are watching this video online also, Sir Ken Robinson, one of the things he talks about is a lot of times schools are maybe not the best place to teach creativity because sometimes schools are very focused on knowledge-driven curriculums, and so students are just sort of receptacles for receiving knowledge, and then they need to sort of give that knowledge back. Whereas we're going to be talking today about the idea of the importance of creativity and the fact that there are ways in which we can actually teach people to develop their skill, to develop their ability to be more creative, so that they can be taking their knowledge that they're learning, their skills that they're learning, and apply them in new ways. And I think we're going to argue that the arts is one of the best ways to do that. So creativity is a process of having original ideas that have value. And so I think there's two pieces to this that are really important. We're not saying it's just to come up with weird, crazy ideas. Those weird, crazy ideas need to be anchored in something of value, of something of meaning, and usually that has to do with having done some really hard work and having prior learning. We first have to learn the rules, as they say, before we break them. We first have to have that knowledge base before we can come up with something that's really going to add value when we apply things in a new way. You want to take the next slide?
So good morning, everyone. I'm Lee Dalgano, and I'm the head of creative arts. I teach music as well, and the head of music. And I've been at West Island School a long time, and I've watched the arts, move with change. And so today, what I'm going to talk to you about is not necessarily about the power of the arts to gain acceptance into universities to do an arts course. That's not what the purpose of this presentation is about. It's showing what the arts as a medium for creative thinking, for creativity, and finding how that can link to other kinds of courses that are non-arts. And so that's going to be what we're looking at today. And just on what Michael was saying here is that every single person has that capacity for creativity and creative thinking. And so we all come up with our own unique and original ideas, like you said, and that these ideas are actually worth something because they have a purpose, they have value. And the thing about creative thinking is it is not solely in the domain of the creative arts. That is just not true. You can be creative, you can be solving a mathematical problem. That requires creative thinking. So I think the question is that if creativity and creative thinking is universal in that all of us have the capacity for creative thinking, then how can studying an arts subject help your child be a successful applicant to these more highly selective universities? Because if creative thinking is universal, then if they're not studying the arts, but if they are studying the arts, how can that transfer that creative thinking? And the arts is actually a very good medium. It is a wonderful vehicle to develop that creative thinking. So I'm going to be talking about creative thinking and creativity in the arts, but I'm going to try and make those links with other courses that many of our student population apply for. So the arts are very well suited, like I said, to teaching and learning creativity. I have some notes which I'm going to sort of read from because there's quite a lot to pull this all together. The arts at West Island School do matter. The school values the arts. And I'm sure if I asked you to put your hand up, do you value the arts? Does your child value the arts? And I know that you would be putting your hand up for that as well, because that's why you're here. At West Island School, we actually promote a kind of process-driven academic creative inquiry approach to learning in the arts, rather than just simply mastering techniques to copy existing works, or to recall knowledge, or to follow instructions. Our students, we empower them to move beyond that kind of rote learning of knowledge, to become innovative problem solvers who often are collaborating in teams for that sort of a common goal, a united success. So the core of our arts education is this idea of creativity, creative thinking being transferable. And we want in our classrooms, in our arts classrooms, to promote that kind of thinking where the students think and act creatively in a kind of open-ended environment that fosters all those wonderful things that we know that creativity is about, like imagination, experimentation, critical evaluation, and iterative refinement, where they're constantly trialing, experimenting things. We want them to be in that environment rather than strictly adhering to perhaps a set of rules or, and seeking just a single correct answer. There is nothing, in the arts, we don't have a right or wrong. And I think that's one of the most wonderful things about the arts, is that you can explore and experiment with so many different avenues. And it's that kind of concept that we need to transfer into other subjects. And actually, the students are doing it, but it's cognitively recognizing it. and then taking that with them to their university application process as well. Let me just talk about STEM for a minute, the science, technology, engineering and maths. Traditionally, STEM actually focuses on what we call convergent thinking, where they're finding a single correct answer. But if I add arts to that, and we then call that STEAM, STEAM then promotes what we call divergent thinking, which is generating many creative ideas to find solutions, to solve problems. And that works alongside convergent thinking as well. There's a nice balance between the two. The STEAM approach reflects on the work of sort of the scientists and the mathematicians and the engineers, increasingly these days in collaboration with designers, artists, communicators, to produce sort of innovations that are not only technically sound, but also intuitive, ethical, and appealing to humans. Steve Jobs actually famously credited a calligraphy course with inspiring the elegant typography of his first sort of Macintosh computers. So we see this kind of business approach combined with an art form. So while STEM provides a technical foundation, the arts provides that creative mindset and human insight into innovative, aesthetic, and impactful, human-centered ways of living. If we asked our STEAM team to design and build, for instance, a sustainable city, in a pure STEM project, our mathematicians, our scientists, our technology people, their focus would stop once the functional, efficient city was built. But in a STEAM team, the visual artists would be there, and they would be creating an aesthetically pleasing, appealing environment. So through architecture, landscape, colour palettes. They'd create visualizations in maps and drawings, graphs to present the environmental benefits. And they'd design a kind of a visually appealing city layout for human well-being. So working on that concept of urban planning. So there's that kind of combination relationship between a STEM and the arts people in problem solving a real world authentic problem. There's another interesting example I've got of a STEAM project that relies on the creativity in the arts. It's an integration between science, technology, and dance. And it's in the design of a coded choreography and motion capture system. And the goal is to use technology to translate the movement of dance into measurable data, which can then be manipulated and performed by a dancer. So a choreographer is going to create the dance. They'll create movement that is both aesthetically pleasing, it's beautiful, it's expressive, but it also can be translatable into coded commands. And the STEAM scientist would then study the kinetics or the biomechanics, how the body moves, the force that's created, the balance, and analysing muscle memory, and the physics of jumps and turns. So you've got there a creative person working with your technology and your scientists and looking at the physicality of dance. And, you know, we can see that transfer into so many other real life situations, like I'm thinking of elderly people's homes where they encourage people to move. And so under the supervision of doctors who understand the physiology of their bodies, and that combined with that dance therapy is an interesting development in recent years. So the arts are really a powerful medium for demonstrating creativity and thinking skills. And more importantly, like I said, they are that vehicle that drives transfer and interdisciplinary connections in a rapidly changing world. So more than ever before, we need human ingenuity and creativity to make human-centered aesthetic designs. In terms of how does creativity add value, I've been talking about thinking skills, and the World Economic Forum claims a shift towards skills such as creative thinking over knowledge is being driven by the rapid pace of technological change, globalization, and the need for a workforce that can adapt and innovate. They released a report in January this year about the future of jobs and the skills that you need to get them. And they're saying that technology skills, AI, big data, cybersecurity, technology literacy, will grow rapidly in the next 5 years, and that the soft skills of creative thinking and resilience and flexibility and agility are rising in importance. And that's what we concentrate on in the arts. In an age where automation and artificial intelligence are handling routine tasks that the demand for human creativity is soaring. Universities and employers want people who can think, like you said, outside the box. And they want them to develop products, services, and processes, and you need that human ingenuity for that. Yes, those technology, AI, and automation processes work with us, but we need the human and their creative thought first. Students studying arts courses, therefore, have a real distinct advantage because at the core, they are thinking about the human experience. They are relying on their emotional intelligence, using communication and collaboration skills to develop ideas, to demonstrate adaptability and flexibility, and a diverse range of thinking skills, which you can see on the screen here. An associate of mine, he's Mr. Mark Coote. He is the development director and fellow at Merton College, Oxford University. And I was talking to him the other day because I was told that I was going to be presenting to you. And I asked him about, what do they want to see in an admissions process, especially about these thinking approaches, creative thinking approaches. And he told me that in the admissions process, they are looking for young people who can articulate and present examples of critical thinking, imagination, and creativity in their personal statements and their interviews. They want to know what prospective students have done to engage with contemporary ideas and culture, demonstrating their knowledge and independent thinking, and most of all, sensitivity to human issues. He said they don't want a descriptive list of what they've done, of their achievements, but they want to be presented with evidence of creative actions and discussion about the behind-the-scenes thinking that these unique and original creative outcomes present. So, for instance, if a musician creates a new piece of music for a new instrument, the Oxford panel would want to know about the exploration of those ideas to create that music, to create that instrument, the solutions they came up with, the processes they went through. And the candidate, therefore, would be very well placed to articulate their divergent thinking, which is all about flexibility, having original ideas, and being maybe that out-of-the-box, over-the-top concepts, which are all pillars of creative thinking. So the different strands of creative thinking that listed there, or just thinking as well, can add value in a range of academic fields, which are listed here on the slide. Engineering and computer science courses, for instance, require systems thinking to understand how components can be designed to interact. They need to use lateral thinking to find unconventional solutions to technical problems to innovate. That is what creativity is all about. Another example in the field of social and natural sciences is inspirational thinking, which is required to create new hypotheses for designs, for novel experiments, for the development of medicines, new medicines, for new preventative cures. So when a student studies the arts, we are working with these thinking processes all the time, and it empowers them to use these diverse range of thinking processes. The arts will help them communicate. It will help them be social, help them manage themselves, and also develop their inquiry and their research skills. And all of these are so valuable in their transfer across different academic fields and disciplines. Right, the arts. So we've got two images here. Can you see that okay? So we often hear misconceptions about the study of the arts, and the arts are not a paint-by-number experience. Or are the arts a prescribed step-by-step process? I'll just pause for a minute. So the arts are not just a paint-by-number or a step-by-step process. And the core value of artistic creation lies in originality, interpretation, and subjective decision-making, rather than merely following a set of established rules or steps. Some people, and these are some of the myths that I want to bust really, but some people may underestimate the value, the challenge, and the university relevance of arts subjects, viewing them as less rigorous, optional extras, or risky in terms of workload and career outcomes. Another misconception is the arts courses don't lead to serious university courses. That's not true. Parents worry that choosing an arts subject will limit their child's option for competitive non-arts university programs like medicine, law, engineering. And I think that if a child is looking at those kinds of courses, and they are an arts student, they are very unique, and that they are doing really focusing on creative thinking, problem solving, and this is what the universities, these highly selective universities, want their candidates, their prospective students to be discussing and talking about. So the arts provides that kind of everyday experience while they're at school. Another myth is that arts courses are only for students going into arts careers. It's not true. The arts are a break from the main workload of all their real subjects. That's another myth. The reality actually is that because of the ongoing nature of practical work and portfolios and internal assessments, the arts are often demand a large, consistent time commitment throughout the 2-year program, rather than just like a high-stakes exam at the end. The arts don't do an exam, a terminal exam at the course. So our students will finish at Easter time usually, or well before that, March, and that then they've got less exams to do. They have more time to concentrate on their revision for those kind of high-stakes terminal exams. So the workload for high-performing students in the arts is generally equal to that of other IB courses. It's just that it starts at the beginning and it's developed and drafted and improved, refined. And that's the nice thing. You can keep going back in that creative process to generate ideas, refine, make it make it the best it can be. So I think the core misunderstanding often though is that often a failure to recognise the academic, the analytical and the time-intensive nature of the arts curriculum and the transferable skills that make these subjects highly valuable for any future academic or professional pathway. And I think that's the message that we're trying to get across today, is that the arts matter and they are highly beneficial for a child's application to selective universities and doing those kind of courses which are very popular, like medicine and law. I'm going to hand over to Michael.
All right, so I think all of the stuff that we've been talking about so far has been really good, and I agree with all of it. Another one that I was reading about that I thought was a cool example too, I think the guy's last name is Schultz. He's the founder and CEO of Starbucks. And a lot of times people talk about him in terms of really his deep appreciation for the arts and how that's been something that's flown into Starbucks being a really successful company, in terms of him thinking about aesthetics, in terms of things like, you know, for a while, walking around with a Starbucks cup was like a status symbol, and people would want to show that they were, you know, holding their Starbucks cup. When you came into that space, it was a space that was really designed for people in terms of the color palette, even thinking strategically about what type of music you'd want to have in that place. So I think all of that stuff is nice, and hopefully you believe us with that. But we're going to get into some of the more technical things really related to the application process. Okay? So how are applications read, and how does an arts course affect an application? There's two main ways that university applications are read. One, we have sort of the UK or the Hong Kong style faculty-based application system, and then we have the US system, which is a bit sort of more holistic. In the US system, they want to see that students have taken rigorous courses, and they want to see that they've performed well. Now, as Lee's mentioned, IB arts courses are considered to be rigorous courses, okay? So technically speaking, in all cases, that may not necessarily be true, but when it comes to IB courses, they definitely are seen as rigorous classes because of the nature of the assessment, because of how you have to present, how you have to write essays, how you have to do research. So it's not just about doing a dance or drawing a pretty picture or singing a song. All of these courses have academic components to them that are really robust and supportive of university readiness, aside from the benefits of sort of the art, et cetera. So from a US perspective, no problem. Happy to see another example of a rigorous course. From the UK perspective, really, in Hong Kong, they're very much focused on the HL courses, okay? And so typically when you get an offer, it will be an IB score, and then you will see that it may be specific to the HL courses. Now, on a social science course, it might be 666 or 665 at HL and no named courses. And then on a STEM course, you know, engineering or something like that, then they might say you need to get 6 in high-level maths, 6 in high-level physics. So we see in STEM courses, they're more likely to name the HL courses, whereas in social science courses, they may not do that. So what you'll find is that what your SL courses are not as directly related to the university admissions process. And so if you fulfill the HL requirement of the application, then they're not overly fixated on what your SL courses were, for example. So we will see that. We had a specific conversation with London School of Economics at a PD session last year, and we said, can students take an arts course as part of a successful application to the London School of Economics? And they said yes. Now, they had the caveat that they would prefer it to be a standard level course, but they said 100% yes, you can take an arts course as part of an application that's successful to LSE. Now, Lee talked about this already a little bit, and it's what is the strategic advantage of having one of your 6 courses be arts? I don't think we would go so far as to say if you don't like the arts, take an arts course. I think that's probably maybe more progressive than our environment to sort of stretch yourself and do something to sort of make yourself uncomfortable. So we're talking about students who enjoy an art. They really enjoy music. They want to continue to study. They really enjoy visual arts. They want to do it. And we're saying, hey, you don't have to give it up, okay? But as we mentioned, when you look at the workflow for a DP course that's not an arts course, typically what you'll have is you'll have 75% of the grade come from examinations. And so about 25% of the grade comes from what's called an internal assessment, which would be some sort of combination of an essay and or a presentation or research. And then you would have about 75% come from exams that are set typically in the end of April and in May of year 13. And you typically would sit 2 to 3 papers depending upon whether it's an SL class or a higher level class. One of the things that is strategically beneficial for students where it's a good fit is you will do your exhibition, you will do your arts work, and your syllabus basically will be done by about April, by beginning of April, end of March. And so as a consequence of that, when you are sitting exams in the end of April and the beginning of May, you're going to be sitting exams for 5 courses instead of 6. And so the quantity and nature of revision, the intensity of your exam schedule will be less intense. So again, I'm not sure that I would argue you should do that solely because of that point, but I would say it's a nice strategic benefit of someone who's chosen that pathway. Other thing that I frequently hear is that there's an anxiety that, oh, if I do visual arts or if I do music or something like that, that's something that's very subjective, and what if the examiner just doesn't like my work? It's really hard to predict what grade I'm going to get. And that we can see from the data is not a legitimate concern. So we have the data of our predicted grades and the awarded grades, and you will see essentially there's no meaningful variance that we overpredict or underpredict in the arts, and we're more accurate predicting in maths or science or something like that. And the reason for that is that in the arts, just like all the rest of our courses, we have criteria. Okay, so our teachers, when they become DP teachers, they need to go to IB workshops, and they learn how to use those criteria. And in Category 1 workshops, they'll get introduced to those criteria, and in Category 2 workshops, they will have extensive training with accurately using those criteria on the associated assessments with that course. If you're going to become an examiner, you then also will do an even higher level of training in using those criteria. And so they're saying a good piece of work has these features or has these characteristics. So if you're grading a painting, you're not saying, do I like it or do I not like it? You're saying, okay, these are the features that a good painting are supposed to have according to sort of the domain of knowledge of art. So they've used proportion appropriately, or they've used composition in a way that sort of makes sense or something like that. They've shown a demonstration, an understanding of color scheme, etc. I don't know the criteria. But the idea is it's not something that's arbitrary. A musician can say, well, I don't like classical music, or I don't like Rachmaninoff or something like that, but you can say it has the features of good music, and I understand why other people like it. So when we look at that data from the awarded grades, when we get them on July 6th, there is no variation between predicted grades in the arts versus others. So if our teachers are predicting them to get a 6 or a 7 or a 5, it's equally likely that they will get those grades as it is when a math teacher or a physics teacher does the same. It's a little bit small for you to see, so I will just sort of read some of them out. But essentially what we wanted to do was, hey, don't take our word for us. This is the raw data. All right, so this is from one graduating class. It's just the graduating class of 2025. And these are students who have taken higher level film, standard level film, higher level music, higher level theater and film, and higher level visual arts and standard level arts. We did not run dance for that graduating class, so that's why there's no dance included here. But we can see that a student got into a global culture industries course at HKU. We've got kids getting into HKUST for Bachelor of Business Administration. UCL is certainly a very sought-after school at our school. We've got kids getting into UCL for Politics and International Studies, Politics and International Relations. USC is one of the most selective schools in the United States, certainly well below 20% for their acceptance rates for economics and mathematics. Durham for law. So we've got lots and lots of examples. NYU and Baylor. So these are all, this is just an exercise where I've said these are selective courses, these are selective universities. I haven't done kids who've gotten into arts courses. I haven't done kids who've gotten into architecture courses. Architecture would be a course where frequently students would take a DP visual arts along those other sort of STEMmy type classes. So sort of the proof is in the pudding. Kids are getting into highly selective universities for highly selective courses, and you're seeing that schools like Durham are happy to accept a student for a course like law, even with music at higher level. I think we're probably going to run a little bit short on this, so I'm not going to go through these slides, but I think both of us in our research and thinking about this, we came back to Steve Jobs a bit in terms of someone who really did think about the interplay between the arts and sort of transferring things. And I think you can look at those slides later if you want when we share them. But this takes me back to the last slide before we go to Q&A. One of the things that we think is one of the biggest values, aside sort of from, I guess I'd say from a strategic perspective, is the idea of standing out, okay? Standing out is a real problem in 2025, and I think it also is a little bit of even more of a specific problem for our community. So UCLA recently had 145,000 applications, and they have 6,500 seats. All right? They normally will accept about 13,000 to 14,000 students, and then about 6,500 of them will end up enrolling. All right? But that's a huge number of applications that need to get read, and it's a lot of competition. When you think about that volume of numbers, it's not really practical to have your university application strategy be that you are going to be the best. Okay? Last year, we had 4 students get 45 IB points at our school. The previous year, we had 5 students get 45 points. That's the maximum score on the IB diploma. We typically are averaging probably 8 to 10 students who have 1,500 plus on the SAT. That's above the 99th percentile on the SAT. If you talk about all of ESF schools, those numbers are relatively consistent across all of ESF. So you're talking about approximately 20 to 30 kids from ESF alone who've got 45 points. You're talking about probably, again, 20 to 30 kids alone just from ESF that are approaching 1,600 on the SAT. Then you're throwing into the mix all of the other high competition schools in Hong Kong, and you can see that having a university application grade of 45 points and having an SAT score of above 1,500, it's great. Universities will like to see it, but it's not particularly unusual. And when we look at a place, well, UCLA won't look at your SAT score, but when you look at a place like UCLA, having a UAG, a university application grade of 45, is nice to see, but it's not particularly unusual. When you talk about something like at Harvard or at MIT, it would be, frankly, pretty typical, right? So when we think about the idea of distinguishing ourselves by being the best, those academic metrics, we run out of room, so to speak, for many of our students. And so we'd like to argue, don't just try to be the best, but try to be special. We've been talking about this idea about thinking outside the box. If your claim to fame is that you've merely mastered a IGCSE and GCSE syllabus, and you've mastered an IB syllabus, and you can regurgitate that syllabus, that's not making a strong argument that you are going to be able to necessarily do anything, very important or impressive, with that knowledge. And when we talk about the elite institutions, they're not looking to accept students who are just going to be competent employees who are competent employee number 45 on the 45th floor of such and such an office building. They are looking to accept people who are going to come up with the new ideas that are going to change the world and make the world a better place in terms of how they're solving problems. And so we think that the evidence from that comes from the idea of having new and original ideas. In a place like Hong Kong, a lot of our kids who are frankly applying for STEM, they have very checklisty university applications, okay? They will take the exact same IB score, or IB courses. They will be predicted 43 plus. They will take the SAT. They will be 1,500 plus, right? They will do the math Olympiad, and they'll probably have bronzes or silvers, and a handful of them will have golds. They will do some physics competitions, okay? And maybe they'll do some competitive summer school applications, right? All of those people are doing the same thing, and they're applying as one of 145,000 people who are applying to that university, and their application is reading very similar. Before, when we were talking about Steve Jobs, and some of the slides that you didn't look at, he was looking at ideas where he was borrowing from the arts. He was borrowing from calligraphy. He was taking the design sensibility from the Bauhaus movement to think about utility and to think about simplicity. You start bringing some of these outside of the box ideas into that Oxbridge conversation, and all of a sudden that's a more memorable conversation. You start thinking about your activities and you're combining things in new interdisciplinary ways that are surprising and memorable, and I think all of a sudden you start to have a much more compelling application. I have a student this year who's doing some really cool things with computer science. Some of the things that I think are really interesting, though, are things that don't relate to computer science. And he's been talking to me about his interest in like ancient history, and we were having some conversations about things like languages and thinking about, for example, when we use coding, we're encrypting information with different types of numbers and symbols and things like that. But when we talk about language, for example, we have different types of writing. So for example, you've got traditional Chinese characters, simplified Chinese characters, which are ideographic systems of communication. Then we've got my script, which would be phonetic script. And then there's all sorts of different types of writing systems and things like that. And that's different ways of encoding information. And by him exploring these funky, weird topics, he is going to be thinking about things in very novel, different ways than a typical student who has taken a checklist, like we see here, to say, I know how to do Python, I know how to do C++, and I got sort of good grades in my math class, right? So I think what we're trying to say here is we want to have kids be authentic. I think we can strongly argue that in the MYP and in the IGCSE, we want as many kids to be taking the arts as possible, and without question, students should be taking risks and enjoying those things. I think one of the things that Lee talked about was the idea of risk-taking as part of art culture. Art culture is experiment with stuff. We're going to put on a play, we're going to do the scene 20 different ways, and then when we get it to work, that's what we're going to use, right? That culture of risk-taking is something that's so valuable in all other disciplines that sometimes gets scared out of us from certain types of academic, classrooms. So we're arguing that these courses are extra important in MYP and GCSE, and that as we then go into something like the DP, these are courses that we have space for in our applications, and that students can do them if they enjoy them. And we definitely would encourage them to continue on with that. All right. With that, we're done with our content for today. We wanted to open the floor, and Ms. Delgado or I can answer any questions that people might have about this topic.
I was looking at the mean grade for 2025 of IB diploma students across all of the 6 groups. And something that I've often done in my exam analysis of the arts is I notice that the arts, if they're not at the top of the highest mean grade, they're always in the top 3 mean grade out of all 6 groups. And and that's quite heartening, because that's another proof that the arts do matter. You can do well in the arts through that risk-taking, that graft, and you will be rewarded for it. I think it is so much better to get a 6 in the arts than get maybe and struggle to get a 5 in something else. So I don't like the word passion sometimes, but students should follow those passions and be given that opportunity to pursue something that they've already got those skills in, and because they're quite good, and a lot of our West Island School students are wonderful art students with such rich diversity, that they come into a class, they bring that diversity, they bounce off each other, and then that goes into their other subjects, and it just lifts their whole game. So I would, that was me having a look at an exams analysis just recently and thinking, wow, we are still up there in the top 3. So success can be found. Yes, it does take. Every subject is hard. Every subject is hard work, but it is so rewarding, and it's one of those things that's fun, and then you get a good mean grade out of it as well. So it's quite I think that's useful to know.
Yeah, and just piggybacking on that, we will have conversations with students where they think they're doing the wise thing, where they say, I love visual arts, but I want to look like a serious student, and I don't want to study economics, but economics sounds like it's a serious course, so for my 6th subject, I'm going to take economics. They don't need to do it. If they love economics, great, but particularly if it's in that SL category, the university doesn't care. And they would rather see them get a 6 in standard level visual arts or standard level music or standard level dance than a 5 in economics if it doesn't relate particularly to the university application. Okay, yeah. So I'm going to repeat the question. I'm going to say my 2 cents quick, and then I'll hand it over to the expert. So basically the question is about workload and workflow, and there was the mention in our session that art students finish their course typically sort of early April, and then they don't have to sit those exams, and students are only focusing on 5 exams. And the question is, well, is that work then front-loaded in a way, where it's extra heavy or something like that? My experience has been that the quantity of work is pretty similar in the arts courses compared to the other courses. I'd actually argue that there might be some value. In a lot of places, visual arts kids will need to use their study periods, and they will go do their work in the art space, because they may not be able to do, like they can do their research at home, but they may not, for example, to be working on their sculpture or their painting at home or something. I actually see this as a win-win, because if you look at our students during their study periods, a lot of times they do not use them as efficiently as we might like. And so there might be some distraction and some social activity, whereas if the students, instead of coming here and hanging out and sort of goofing around a little bit, they're instead going and they're working on their painting or their sculpture, it makes them actually a little bit more disciplined and more productive. That's my thought.
Yeah, that's very true. I think each of the arts subjects have a number of components that get assessed. They are practical, and then they are written work as well. Excuse me. And so the practical components are, there's a balance, sorry, there's an imbalance. So there's more practical work than there is written work. So as Michael said, they can do their research at home like everybody else is doing, writing a 20% IA for their maths course. They can be at home, they can do that. But yes, the other 3 components, there's usually about 4, the other 3 components require them to be working in specialist facilities. So we find art students are always in our studio spaces. And the good thing about that is that as teachers, we set regular deadlines. These deadlines are not, they are draft deadlines. Everything goes through an editing and a refinement process until it's ready. So it's a gradual kind of the spot. You start small and it just kind of everything starts to come together. Now, I mentioned that creative students, they are good time managers mostly. And they can, once they're managing their time and they're building up we have internal assessments, and like an exam, that's an external assessment. We also have external assessments. So they're working in their own time, they're managing themselves, they're managing the requirements of what they're doing. But by going to the studio spaces, the teachers are there. Now, often I'll walk past in a room and I've got one of my Year 13s who's working away on an iMac, and they'll go, "Oh, can you just have a listen to that?" And it's those moments that are so wonderful, that one-to-one interaction that just helps them go a lot further, a lot quicker. And it's maybe just a 2-minute interaction because they're using their time at school to liaise with, to continue their own work and liaise with their teachers. Whereas other people who are, they're just going to class, they can sit there silently, maybe not much interaction. And of course, our class sizes are small. That's a benefit too. So we get that interaction. But, those students in those other groups, subjects, they're going home and opening up a laptop and doing their work. You'll often find that some of our art students, sometimes, they've got to stay back until 5:30 to film, or they've got to take home equipment over the weekend to film. But the buzz that they get from that group work outside of the classroom, it's really an exciting part of the process. So if you manage yourself and you work regularly, and you work in conjunction with your teacher, getting feedback regularly and not leaving anything to that 11th hour, not that we let them do that anyway, because being creative at, the night before is not that successful. So you really must go through a process, a creative process of experimentation, exploration. That does take time. It has to start from the beginning. And as long as we teachers put in little marker points that have them present something in a draft, and then a better draft, and then a more fuller piece of work, that's how we work. So it's gradual, spiral, it builds. But yeah, they have to be good time managers, but we always make sure they are.
Any other questions for today? Okay, I think we'll stop for today then. So thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. We'll have the video up in a couple of days if people want to follow up, and we will put the full slide deck up with Steve Jobs, and we'll share the video again that went out with the email. Okay? Thank you so much.